Today's Old Testament reading is from Isaiah chapter 61. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to grant to those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. Today's sermon reading is from Mark chapter 5. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country, and people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Mike. It is my honor and privilege to introduce our first speaker for our Missions Month, Reverend Greg Hills. I'd like to give him a brief introduction here from his bio. Originally from Central New York, Greg's passion for missions came in college through InterVarsity at North Carolina State University, which culminated in his first missions trip to Kenya. Having received his degree in engineering, he moved to the Boston area where he worked for a military contractor and received training at Gordon Conwell Seminary. During that time, he became convinced that the Lord was calling his family to Istanbul, Turkey. There he worked with local church leaders and taught Bible courses. The Lord eventually led him back to the Boston area, where Greg spent 20 years in pastoral ministry at First Presbyterian Church North Shore. Now he serves as the Northeast Mid-Atlantic Hub Director for Mission to the World, and he hopes to focus his passion for global missions in mobilizing God's people for the Great Commission. Greg now lives in Newark, Delaware, with his wife Heather, 2 daughters and 4 grown sons, and we are just so grateful for you to come to give the word to us here this morning. So with that, let's give a big welcome to Reverend Greg Hills.
Thanks so much. What a privilege to be here. I love introductions because they make you sound so much more important than you really are. And thank you for praying for my voice. I've had this laryngitis for the last 3 weeks, and my 2 teenage daughters love it, but it's tough for me to do my job. But just praying that my voice holds up, I think it will. But I love missions conferences, so I love being part of the kickoff of this. Because, now there's a mirror there. Now this is interesting. I've never preached with a big mirror, and I preached a lot. So this is good. If I'm doing this during the message, you'll know why. But But I love missions conferences because it recalibrates your heart. And I do missions for a living. And my heart is always, what's the next gadget? I need to have this. Have you seen that new technology? I love technology. I don't know if you're the same way. It's so easy to get distracted with everything but the kingdom of God and what God values the most. And so that's why I love missions conferences. I need it for my own heart. And so it's a privilege to be here with you all this morning. And we're going to get a glimpse, really, at the first kind of mission to an unreached people group, so to speak. But just to set up the scene, because you've heard the passage now. Has there ever been a time in your life when you've been so frightened you're just paralyzed? You ever had that happen? Maybe when you were a kid, somebody said something scary. You came across a bully or something and you were frozen. Happened to me when I was about 47, actually. My wife and my 2 daughters were away. I have grown sons as well, and they were back. 2 of them were back from college. And they said, Dad, let's have a guy's movie night. I said, great. What do you want to watch? And they said, let's watch World War Z. Have you seen World War? If you haven't seen it, spare your life. Yeah, the 2 hours of that time. And I said, but you guys, I don't like zombie movies. And they're like, no, Dad, this isn't a zombie movie. Yeah, what's the giveaway? Yeah, the Z. This is a zombie movie, by the way. It's just a virus where people go around and they bite you, and you get the virus, and you bite other people. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's crazy scary. And so the idea is in the movie is if you make a sound and you move, that's when they get you. But if you hold perfectly still, they won't get you. So, of course, my sons go down to their brother's house apartment to stay the night, and there I am, all alone in my house. And I go to bed, had a little trouble getting to sleep. It's about 2 a.m. I wake up, and the movie's I'm in the movie. You ever done that? Like you're half awake, and you're in the movie, and I'm thinking, okay, as long as I don't move. And I just stayed perfectly still for as long as I possibly could. Now, that's a silly story, right? That's just me in a dumb Hollywood movie, thinking about a Hollywood movie. That's nothing compared. Imagine being with Jesus and the disciples that time when they go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee and they meet this demoniac. So we're going to look at 4 things this morning. We're going to look at the place, the power. I love alliteration, by the way, so today's sermon is brought to you by the letter P. The place, the power, the people, and the purpose. But let's look first of all at the place. The Gerasenes, it's across the Sea of Galilee. I have a little map up there. You can see Decapolis as well, means 10 cities. And there's at least 9 of the 10 cities up there. They don't know all of them necessarily. But they were 10 Greek cities established by Alexander the Great. So this is primarily, not exclusively, but primarily Gentile territory. And so if you're familiar with Jews in the ancient Near East culture, they avoided Gentile territory. Right? You know the story perhaps of the Samaritan woman where if you were trying to save time, you would go down through, but even then Jews would go around. This is not even anywhere on the path where they would have gone. The storm has blown them, and to them it seems like this random event, right? But not to Jesus. Not to Jesus. This is not a random event to Jesus. Jesus does everything with intentionality, even calming the storm beforehand and then having them drift to the other side. Have you ever seen the movie, The Bourne series? Now, that's the movie I should have watched with my son. One of my favorite episodes of the Bourne movie is Bourne Supremacy. And if you know the Bourne series, Jason Bourne he's a CIA agent, specially trained. And he goes rogue because he loses his memory. He doesn't know who he is. And the CIA is trying to kill him because they don't know what he's trying to do. And at one point, he's going around and all these things are happening. And one of the agents says, maybe this is just random. And his fellow agent, she says, no, this is not random. They don't do random. There's always an objective. And brothers and sisters, that's the way it is with the Lord in our lives. This is a little bit of a sidebar. But it's, I don't know, if you're in the thick of stuff, it's hard not to see it as random. And yet our God does not do random. He has you going through whatever it is for his purposes, and that's exactly what's happening here in the life of the disciples. And so to make matters, okay, so here they're on Gentile territory, right? To make matters worse, carved into this rocky shoreline are these tombs. All right, so you're in Gentile territory, it's unclean territory. You're amongst tombs, unclean, you don't want to come in contact with a body. And tombs back then were just as spooky as they are today. If you ever walk through a cemetery at night, here they are, it's maybe night or just dawn. And then, just when you think it couldn't get worse, this demoniac comes running out of the tomb with an unclean spirit. So you got unclean place, you got the tombs, another more narrow unclean place, and now you got this guy with these unclean spirits. And then what's in the backdrop? 2,000 pigs. 2,000 unclean animals. And some authors, some commentators, think that perhaps there were so many that maybe these were being set aside for pagan sacrifice. We don't know that, right? So you got an unclean place, you got a burial ground, you got unclean spirits, you got unclean animals. Everything about this scene to the disciples says, we don't belong here. We have got to get out of this place. And what does Jesus do? He steps out of the boat. He steps out of the boat right into this territory. So the first thing we're going to learn is, brothers and sisters, there's no place that Christ will not go. There's no place that Christ will not go. He goes anywhere. He eats with sinners. He goes and he ministers to the Samaritan woman. He goes to the Decapolis. See, we run from difficulty, right? When there's emergencies, we run. Jesus goes towards it. He goes right into the heart of the difficulty. That's the God we love. That's the God we serve. Because he's the one, as Luke 19:10 says, right? The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. That's what Jesus does. And so not only, you think about it, not only does he give up his throne in heaven, not only is he born under the law, not only is he born in a very kind of a poor family, in means, very meager means, but then he goes to the worst places on earth to seek and to save the lost. That's what he does. And that means, folks, that wherever we go, wherever the Lord sends us, we go with his presence. He never leaves us alone. He will never leave us nor forsake us. His presence goes wherever we go. I remember one of the first times I'd been to Bangladesh. We have some folks there. We had some folks there with MTW. We had a national that we were working with. And we were just touring around. It was my home church, and we were trying to get involved there where I was pastor. And they were just showing us different ministries. And they took us right to downtown, right to kind of the red light district, where this woman named Robin, I'll never forget, she's running a ministry to women who are coming out of trafficking, human trafficking. I mean, you want to talk about the gates of hell in this city. This is where it was. And she had this 4-story building, and you walk in, and there's a kitchen where they're making all the meals, and there's women coming and going. They have children from coming out of trafficking. And then the next level is this training center, and the next level is this dorm room, and it was chaos. But these women are coming in contact with the gospel. And I said, Robin, I don't know what drives you or how you do this, but I will pray that God will continue to give you the perseverance to do this, because that's where God sends us. He sends us as his people to the most difficult places, which is a huge challenge, isn't it? Because when you think about American culture, what drives American culture? There's a lot of things that drive American culture, but there's a few things like creating a safe environment, comfort, safety, security. Those are our values, right? That's what we want. We don't want any of that stuff that goes on out there so to speak. Maybe you've heard of the term helicopter parents. You know, the parents, they hover over their kids and they don't want anything to go wrong. And so I'm talking to a youth director at a church, and he says, well, there's also a term called snowplow parents. Snowplow parents. I have to make sure I'm north of I'm in the Northeast to talk about this, right? But the parents who want to just plow everything so that it's smooth for their children. But that's not necessarily what the gospel calls us to, does it? People say, maybe go on missions. I'm thinking about going on missions. And the question, what is the first question? Is it safe? Is it safe? Remember when Jesus is, the Great Commission is actually his resurrection words to the disciples. He's about to go to heaven. His last words aren't, hey, be safe, guys. He doesn't ever say that. What does Jesus always say to his disciples? Follow me. Follow me. And so we follow Jesus to some of the most difficult places. I'll share something downstairs too about some new fields, or at least one new field that we're involved in, and what other people would consider to be a place you should never go. And yet been there a couple times. It's actually amazingly safe. But our goal is not to create a safe place. Our goal is to follow Jesus, rather. And if you're parents here today, I'm going to try to step on everybody's toes at some point today, right? But one of the, not the biggest hurdles to missions, I would say, but one of the biggest, you know what it is? It's parents and grandparents. Because they don't, who wants to send your kids? You're hoping that God will send somebody else's kids overseas, right? To some difficult country. But Lord, don't send my kids. Here's my challenge to you. If you're a parent or a grandparent here today, right? In Matthew 9, right? The fields are white with harvest, right? We say, pray to the Lord of the harvest that he would raise up workers for the harvest. Here's my challenge to you as a parent or grandparent. Would you, when you look at Matthew 9, would you put the name of your son or daughter or your grandchildren in that? Now, that's a real prayer. Lord, would you send my kid overseas? And by the way, if you're a young adult, we have a bunch of people with MTW who are empty nesters, right? Or going overseas. I had a woman whose daughter talked her out of going on the mission field because it wasn't safe. So if you're a young adult, don't talk your parents out of going. If God is calling them, join them. Tell them you'll pray for them. Tell them you'll be involved in their ministry. Now, there's no place that Christ will not go. But now let's look at the powerful forces, the powerful forces of evil, right? And it's a biblical worldview, right? There are angels and there are demons, right? Those who have fallen angels. So we know from the biblical worldview that God has enemies. And so here we have a demoniac, a man who is possessed by a demon. But this is no ordinary possession, is it? This man is overrun by demons. There's a legion, which in Roman terms could have been up to 5,000. Now we know there's probably at least 2,000. Why? Because there are 2,000 pigs that went over. This man is possessed by a huge number of demons. Now, and here's the beauty that we don't know why he got possessed. I love that about Jesus, right? Like you go in the gospel, sometimes you know somebody's done something they shouldn't have done and they got in a predicament and Jesus rescues them. We have no idea, right? If we were going to this guy, if we knew this guy, he was involved in the occult. That's what happens when you get involved in the occult. He's possessed now. Too bad for him. He made his bed, lie in it. If Jesus said that to us, brothers and sisters, not one of us would be saved. Not one of us. He rescues us out of the mess we made of our lives. And so we don't know how he got demon-possessed. But we also wonder, too, why didn't they had trouble, right, chaining him. He'd break out of the chains. I have often wondered this, why didn't they just send in a legion of soldiers and kill the guy? They could have done that. Roman soldiers were known how to kill people. But then you got to understand Greco-Roman worldview. And they believed there were gods and demigods, right, that would send people, who were demon-possessed to punish them for something that they had done wrong. It's like this give and take, right, this scale. And so the last thing you want to do is go kill this guy, because then you're going to make the guys even more angry. Your best bet is to just chain him up and try to contain him. Let him scream around in the tombs and hope he doesn't come to your door. But look at the man's condition. Look at the man's condition. He's possessed. He's naked. He's isolated. And he's in a continual state of self-destruction, but never being able to be destroyed. What does that sound like to you? What does that sound like to you? This is a word picture of hell. This is a picture of what it's like to be apart from God's grace for eternity. And so that's why it just be eternally being dehumanized. Folks, it's hard to think about what it would be like to be separated from the grace of God for eternity. But this is what it'll be like. Right? I remember talking to a young man, he's like, just trying to strike up a conversation. He's like, well, I'd rather party in hell than be in heaven. Right? Or Billy Joel, right? What is that? I'd rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints. Anybody a Billy Joel fan? No? Okay, I'm dating myself now. Does anybody know who Billy Joel is here? Okay, good. Right? But the idea is, I'd rather party in hell than be in heaven with all the boring Christians or whatever. It's like, dude, you don't understand what hell's going to be like. I wish I'd thought of this. You ever think about what you should have said 2 days later to somebody? Which is, no, this is what it's going to be like. That's why I love MTW's vision statement. We want the gospel to spread throughout the world, the church to grow, Satan's kingdom to be destroyed, and Christ's reign extended to the ends of the earth. I love that. I love that. So you see this demon possession. This guy's got a legion of demons. It feels like there's no hope for this man whatsoever. But then you look at the power of Christ. The divine authority. So the demon runs and he falls at Jesus' feet. He's cringing at Jesus' power. And I think of this a little bit like Philippians chapter 2, right? When every knee will bow in heaven and earth and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God. That, to me, is what's happening here. It doesn't matter whether you love Jesus or not. One day you will bow to him because he is Lord. And that's what's happening here. And so Jesus shows his complete authority, and he casts out these demons into a herd of pigs, and they self-destruct into the sea. By the way, kids, a little question for you. What is it called when a pig jumps into the water? You know what it's called? It's called a swine dive. Not swan dive, sorry. I'm just trying to see is anybody listening? Y'all here? I only do that. I know you're listening by the number of groans. Plus, it's kind of heavy at this point. But Jesus shows his divine authority. He casts the demons out, and they all go into these pigs. So there's no place that Christ will not go. Number two, there's no power that Christ cannot subdue. There's no power. And the powers around us seem awful, don't they? They seem powerful. I love the earlier reading with or was it one of the songs where the nations rage, but the Lord is sovereign over all of them. Just doesn't always feel that way, does it? There's no power that Christ cannot subdue. He has power over sickness, creation, evil spirits, and ultimately over sin and death. So when we do training for missions, and I got a chance to meet some of your missions committee when we did a training we call Cultivate, which helps missions teams create a culture of missions in the church. And one of our values is called recklessly dependent. Recklessly dependent. Listen to how we put it. God calls us away from the status quo to take risks by faith in his strength for the sake of his eternal kingdom. The Lord calls his people to step out in faith that seems reckless, at least to the world, right? It seems reckless. Yet that reckless abandonment to the will of the Lord brings glory and honor in him. And I'm going to challenge you individually and as a congregation that God is calling you to step out in faith. And it can be risky sometimes. There's parts of this area, there's parts of the world that seem scary, that seem difficult. But he calls us to step out in faith into hard places, and his presence goes with us. See, there's no place that Christ will not go in this earth, in this world. And there's no place he won't send us by his power and grace through the power of the Holy Spirit. But let's look at the responses now. Because, whenever you read the Gospels, it's always situation, response, and you got to see the response here now. Jesus has cast out the demon, or the demons. And so what is the first thing that happens? The herdsmen, what do? They run to report to the village. Why? My guess is they're trying to stay out of trouble, right? 2,000 pigs. Somebody's living, or a bunch of people's living, just went over the cliff and drowned in the sea. And they're just floating around on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. So they're going all over the place, and you got to see what happened. This wasn't our fault. You got to believe us. You got to come see this guy, because it wasn't our fault. So you got the herdsmen, right? Well, the people, they get the people's attention, right? Because the people come, right? 2,000 pigs go over. It's a big event. It's a big event. And they saw the man there who they knew. Everyone knew who he was. He's calm. Something's different about him. And then they see Jesus. And what is their response? They beg Jesus, leave us. Jesus, leave us. Now, this is two sides to a coin, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you understand their fear. This guy comes in and subdues something they had no control over. They could not get this guy under control, and Jesus just does it, and so they're scared. You'd think at one hand they want to lynch him, but they get something. This guy's got power. Please, they beg him. A lot of begging in this. If you go down through and see how many times the word beg is used in this passage, right? The demons are begging Jesus not to cast him out. These people are begging Jesus, get away from us. But there's the other side of that, isn't there? Because on the other hand, it's kind of sad. Because the very one who could give them life, they're asking to leave. Now, put a bookmark in there, because we'll come back to that in just a moment. But then you have the man. If you have a Bible there, look at verse 15. You don't have to. I'll just read it. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there, look at this, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. The previous condition was hell-like. It was hell on earth for this guy. He's dressed, he's in his right mind. Check it out. His shame is covered. His mind is restored. And his self-destruction is reversed. And he seems to be fully aware of everything that's happened. He knew he was demon-possessed, and he knew he was exercised by the Lord Jesus Christ. Folks, that is the power of the gospel. That is the power of the gospel that Jesus brings to this earth and to our lives. So there's no place that Christ will not go. There's no power that Christ cannot subdue. And thirdly, there's no person Christ cannot redeem. No person Christ cannot redeem. The most unlikely can be saved. Picture in your mind a person who is a colleague or a relative who's just so opposed to the gospel, and you think, they could never come to Christ. I just can't see it. Now let me challenge you to use your sanctified imagination and imagine what would it take for that person to come to know the Lord. And I love this man's story, right? He's not a seeker, right? It's not Friendship Sunday. He didn't get invited by a friend. Friendship Sundays are awesome. Don't get me wrong. You should have them. He's not seeker. He's not a seeker. In fact, he has no power to seek Jesus at all. Completely overrun by the brokenness of this world. No, Jesus came to him. that beautiful? Now, let me ask you this. How about when you came to Christ? If you may or may not even remember. Some of you probably grew up in the church, right? You grew up in the church, and you might not even know. You just heard the gospel when you were a kid, and you just realized at some point you believed in Jesus. Now, let me ask you this. Is your conversion, so to speak, any less miraculous than this man's? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's still Jesus coming to you and saving you from your sin, giving you the forgiveness that only he can give, drawing you to himself as only he can do. Think about your story. But there may be a few of you here today, you go, you know what? But you don't know what I've done. You don't know what I've done. I mean, it's not good. My life has not been wonderful. I mean, I'll tell you, right? And you can talk about the stories and these sins that you just, but you know how many times I've done this, right? In fact, there's no sin, brothers and sisters, that you've committed that Christ cannot forgive. There's no shame that he can't cover. There's no circumstance that he cannot redeem. Why? How? N.T. Wright has a beautiful quote in his commentary on the Gospel of Mark. And this is what he says. He says, at the climax of Mark's story, Jesus himself will end up naked, isolated, outside the town, among the tombs, shouting incomprehensible things as he is torn apart on the cross by the Roman standard of torture. That's what Christ has done. He substituted himself for you. Your sin to him, his righteousness to you. Your shame to him, his honor to you, so to speak. And God is on the move. He's on the move here, and he's on the move around the world. And maybe some of you are like, you know what? Maybe it's time. Maybe today is the day where you say, you know, it's time for me to surrender to the Lord. You're not here by accident. God doesn't do random. Maybe this is the day the Lord is calling you by his Spirit. And God is doing his work around the world. I have a friend in the Middle East, and I ask him from time to time, I say, brother, you know, what's going on in your life? And you have to ask him like that, and then he just says, oh, by the way, right? He says, he wrote to me an email a little while ago. This is what he says. Greg, pray for dozens of men and their families to come to faith in Christ among this new group in the village south of us. We just met today with a group of 30 men. That is all that we could fit into the house we visited. The whole thing was arranged by one man who was starting to consider the gospel, and he pulled together his whole community so we could come and share with them. There were at least 17 more that would have come, but were told to wait because of space. All of them expressed the desire to start meeting every week for Bible study with us, all of them from Muslim backgrounds. I was a pastor in New England, north of Boston, for 20 years. I never had a living room full of people waiting for me to come and speak. But God is on the move. He's on the move in your life, and he's on the move in people's lives everywhere around the globe. It's amazing to me. It's amazing to me. But now we're going to land this plane here in a minute. Notice the man's response. Now, when I want to look at his response, because what does he say? He says, the demons of this man begged. Here we go. We're begging again, right? He begged that he might go with Jesus. He wants to get on the boat and go with him. Of course, why not? Jesus just saved him. Why wouldn't he want to go with Jesus? But look at what Jesus says. He did not permit him. But he said, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. Now that's amazing. Because now I see you're a multicultural church, right? Some of you come from kind of the Western innocent guilt. That's our mindset. Some of you come, though, from a shame culture, honor shame culture. And you understand, because my first reaction is, go home to your friends. It's like, what friends? What friends? What family? We spent 4 years in Turkey. It's an honor-shame culture. There are honor killings for people who come to Christ in other parts of the world. And you're thinking, go home to what? His network is decimated. Nobody wants to be a part of this man's life anymore. He's brought shame on them. All of those things would have been laid waste. Think of the pain he brought to the people. But then Jesus says, no, I want you to go. So look at the power of his story. The power of his story, what Jesus has done. See, I said put a bookmark in there, right? The people reject Jesus. They beg him to go, but Jesus doesn't reject them, does he? You know, I'm going to send you a witness, right? To this, in a sense, first unreached people group. Never had the gospel outside the boundaries of Judaism for the most part. And so Jesus has a plan for them. So there's no place that Christ will not go, no power that Christ cannot subdue, no person that Christ cannot redeem, and there's no purpose that Christ cannot fulfill. Christ has purpose to use you. Us, jars of clay, broken people, that he puts back together, and he uses us in his kingdom. That's why I love this idea of cultural evangelism in the church. God has chosen to use you. And you say, wait a minute, yeah, but I'm not a pastor. I'm not an elder. I'm not trained. I don't know what to do. Let me ask you this. How much do you think this man knew about the Bible, this Gentile man? Right? How many men's breakfasts had he ever been to, right? How many small groups had he attended? Like none. What does he have? He has one thing. He has the story of what Christ has done in his life. That's the power. Now, surely he's going to gain some more of that knowledge. But Christ, he says, go home and tell everybody what God has done for you. That's all I want you to do. You think, okay. It says people came, right? He proclaimed, and everyone marveled, okay. Now you think, how effective was this guy really? I mean, was it really? He's just talking about Jesus. Go 2 or 3 chapters later in Mark 8. Jesus goes and he feeds, right? Jesus goes to that area again, the area of the Decapolis. You remember what happened? 4,000 people gather and Jesus feeds them. We don't know if it had all to do with this guy, but certainly this guy's testimony had something to do with 4,000 people gathering around Jesus 3 chapters later in the book of Mark. The power of what Christ has done in you. Folks, think of one thing God has done for you in the last, 6 months? 3 weeks? 6 hours? I don't know. Think of one thing that God has done for you. And then pray this week for the opportunity to share it with somebody. They may think you're off the wall. They may not. I think we have a culture that's desperate to hear how God works in merciful and mighty ways in our lives. Because, brothers and sisters, God does not do random. He's working out his purposes here. He's working out his purposes around the globe. There's no place that Christ will not go. There's no power that Christ cannot subdue. There's no person that he cannot redeem. And there's no purpose that he cannot fulfill. So I ask you, what's keeping you from taking that next step? Be in prayer. Be thinking about how God, over these next 4 weeks, is calling you individually and calling you as a congregation to tell that story to this world. Pray with me, please.